Morning guys, Stag, Wolf and Stag Wastelanders. Doing another drive-in video because obviously I'm at work. And as some of you guys may have known or may have heard on my previous videos, my vehicle is currently unreliable to get me to the wasteland and the mountains. I wanted to talk about some things going on. We're all aware of the incidents that happened in Texas and Buffalo, New York. Some of you guys know, some of you guys that watch our channel videos, you guys are aware that I took a second job recently because of the economic situation to work in private security. The former contract that we had was unarmed private security. We are working to get armed private security contracts. Former experiences in previous careers I've had allows me to be able to have the capabilities to do such, and the talent and the education. So, having said that, would I have been able to stop the threats? No. Training, yes. Training, competent training for the situation that happened in Buffalo. The armed security officer was a retired police officer. He had all the training. He had all the experience. Did he save lives by engaging the threat? Absolutely. The man is a hero. For those of us in the wasteland, portion of us are big believers in Alcatraz or Nordic or whatever you want to call it. Regardless of the man's skin tone, the Valkyries carried him away to Valhalla, where he could tell his ancestors of his great triumphs. Just my personal belief. You could say he went to heaven. The man's a hero. I don't care if you don't like the police, you don't like law enforcement. Little background. I did 2 years in law enforcement. I did 2 years as a cadet before that. So, for you to say that the police are the bad guys, you have to look at the politicians and understand that law enforcement, their only purpose is to enforce the laws. I understand that the Supreme Court ruled that cops don't have a constitutional duty to protect you. But the truth is, most cops will ignore what the Supreme Court said, and they will serve and protect their communities, and they will put their lives on the line for you. They will honor their oath, and they will do what's right. And I would say that's 90% of all police officers. You'll have those 10% bad apples. The ones that currently are taking the positions vacated by officers who are no longer wanting to do their position, and I don't blame them. But the man in Buffalo, the security officer, he honored his oath. He continued to serve his community. The situation in Texas, I can tell you a lot of people are wanting to blame the police officers for it. The problem is, police officers are instructed. They still have a chain of command to follow. They still have orders to follow. They are instructed to hold off until backup arrives. It's unfortunate. And yeah, there are some that are unwilling to do what they need to do. They also are trained to maintain a perimeter around a critical mass casualty incident as to not create more casualties. They're their duty is to protect and serve. I'm a big proponent of having armed security in schools. If you guys don't know how a school resource program works, and it probably works differently in every state or every community. The agency I worked with, we had one school resource officer. He was, during the school year, he was assigned just to the schools. And then in the summer, he was assigned back to patrol. Most agencies that I know of, especially in my state, that's how they work. You have one school resource officer assigned to every high school. And then when the summertime comes, their duty is back out on the streets to patrol. But they're also, if there is a mass casualty incident somewhere else that's not regulated to the school, or there's a big enough incident, they will be pulled out of that school and respond. It's just, that's how they have to do it. So for people to attack the police officers who were just doing their jobs to prevent a bad situation from getting worse, I don't like what they were doing to the parents that were trying to go in there, but at the same time, having worked that side of the line, I know what the officers were doing in that incident. They were trying to prevent a bigger situation. You have to understand that they're feeding off of the information relayed to them by dispatch and relayed to them by other officers that have a better vantage. Communication is key. You're trained as a law enforcement officer to observe, communicate, or observe and report everything that you have. All communications are reported. All information has to be disseminated to all the other units and all the other officers that are there and back to your dispatch. And folks, believe it or not, sometimes dispatch gets things wrong, and dispatch they're human. Just like the officers on the street, they're human, and their job is to relay that information to the officers on the street. You can't expect dispatchers to get things during a stressful situation 110% correct. Many a time, a dispatcher will relay bad information to an officer. You hope that doesn't happen, but it does. Regardless of what you believe, despite all the training that dispatchers have and all the training that law enforcement officers have, they don't have, they can't be stopped from having screw-ups. So with that said, I am a big proponent for having specifically armed and trained security officers within a school. Security officers in critical areas. If you're going to have a no weapons policy, you need to have people that are armed, trained, and prepared to deal with a situation, and have them on site at all times. You need to have the competent people. You need to have people that don't qualify just once a year. So, little story. The agency I worked with qualified once a month on all our weapons. Every weapon we were qualified once a month. Usually, the end of the month, we would go out to the range and qualify. I know other agencies do the annual qualifications that are required. The state bare minimum is required for annual qualification. Or some agencies did quarterly qualifications. Some agencies I know do quarterly qualifications, and I know other agencies that do monthly qualifications. You are required to qualify monthly. I spoke to the owner of the security company that I'm working part-time with, and since we are doing armed security, or we will be doing armed security eventually, I brought up the fact that that's how my old agency worked. Was instead of yearly qualifications, we did monthly qualifications. Instead of quarterly qualifications, we did monthly qualifications. would expect that same level of training, that same level if we are to move forward as an armed security force and an armed security company. I would expect that same level of training. I would expect the same level of what amounts to a field training or an academy level training, which means not just your firearms training, but your detainment training. In law enforcement, it'd be arrest training. Your procedures required for that. Baton training, so your non-lethals. OC training and certification. In law enforement, we were given a 2-year certification. So we were certified for 2 years in the use of OC. So every 2 years, you're required to go and get recertified. Okay? Baton certification was the same way. You were required every 2 years to get recertified on use of baton. That didn't mean that we didn't have trainings on the use of baton throughout that period. Sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly, we would have a baton training. OC, obviously, we did our training, and that was it for 2 years. Taser certification, same way. You were trained, certified for 2 years. 2 years. So, to have these trainings and have these skills and these different tools on your belt, I would expect no less. I've told him that would be my expectations, would be to have trainings and certifications, and the training and certification requirements are that you have to pass these certifications and trainings. You have to go through these trainings. You have to do a field training, an FTO type of scenario. You would have to go through FTO. I wouldn't expect in security to be the full 6 months that I did in FTO before heading out, but I would expect 3-month minimum, and I've already told him that. But I'd also expect monthly trainings on different things. I would expect a monthly training protocol on weapons, monthly training protocol on use of force, monthly training protocol on detainment, monthly training protocol on patrol tactics, different scenarios, different tactics. That is the level of commitment and training that I expect, even when it comes to personal defense. I expect people to do a monthly training, set themselves up, learn the FBI standards, learn law enforcement standards of training, center of mass shooting, aim for center of mass when you're doing weapons training. Just a head is obviously a smaller target than center of mass. I would expect everyone to, at least the bare minimum, if you're not training in your own personal self-defense scenarios, I would expect you to be training monthly. Train consistently, train monthly if you can't train weekly. If you can't train daily, train weekly. If you can't train weekly, train monthly. Train consistently. Because we never know when the tools that we're carrying out there for our own family's defense and our own self-defense we're going to need to employ them. If you're adding non-lethal to your everyday carry, then you need to train at least monthly on it. If you're adding medical to your everyday carry, you should train, and I think a monthly training at minimum on that even as well should be required. You should be rotating out medical supplies every 6 months. Every 6 months to a year, you should be rotating out your medical supplies and putting fresh medical supplies back in your kit. I know some of the stuff is good for a couple of years, chest seals and things like that, as long as it's not damaged, as long as the packaging is not ripped open, they're still good. However, I think that you should still, if you're carrying it every day, you should be cycling that stuff out every 6 months. Just like ammo. I cycle out my carry ammo every 6 months for fresh carry ammo. Because I want my ammo to do me well during the time I need it, should I ever need it. So you should be cycling out these things. You should be doing training. You should be having, if you're training a mag, you should have a different training every month. If you're doing a survivalist group, a mag, you again should be training every month. If you're doing armed security or unarmed security, you should expect your employer to have trainings every month. You should also expect to have a bare minimum of 3 months FTO, field training officers. For those of you that don't understand, you should have a field training officer who will operate the FTO. Okay? These are things that you need to think about. These are options. These are ideas that I think that people need to be putting into their head. The world is not getting safer, especially not under the Brandon administration. The world is getting more dangerous. And as that, we as prepared people, we as prepared mind, need to be going and getting the training or increasing our training and spending more time learning our tools of our trade. So I'm going to push this again from another year or another 6 months or whatever the last time I did a video on getting training. I'm going to put this out there. Get training. If you've already gotten training, practice those skills weekly, daily, monthly, whatever you can do. Do not do quarterly. If you're working in a position like security or law enforcement, your agency should already have a policy in place for monthly, daily, weekly, whatever trainings they are. If you're in security, your company should have daily, weekly, monthly trainings. You need to increase these skills. You need to be prepared. You should not allow them to get away with annual training. Annual training should be cut out. It should be quarterly, but I would say better monthly training at the minimum. If you're in security, you should have weekly trainings. So, as always, guys, this has been Stag with Wolf and Stag Wastelanders, and I'll see you in the Wasteland.